So Danny Flexen for Seconds Out, delighted to be joined by Simon Block. I'm not sure quite how to address you because are you still the Honorary Secretary of the Commonwealth Boxing Council, or has the transition now taken place?
Transition has taken place. Debbie Down is now the On-Secretary, but I'm still with the council, and for the time being, I'm the, what do we decide? Senior Policy Consultant.
Right, okay.
And but I'm also a member of the WBC Board of Governors as well.
Just tell us what prompted you to make the transition to Debbie after so long in post, 40 years, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, around the middle of this decade, between 10 and 20, 2014, I realised I was 64, and I've been doing the job for a long time. Nobody at the board wanted to do the job, and I didn't know anybody else that wanted to do the job. And I had a chat with my chairman, and I said, "Look, I could get run over by a bus. I've got everything here in my office. I know it. I know everything, and nobody else knows anything. So I really need someone to train up." And I worked with Debbie. You'll know Debbie Down very well. She was tremendous at the board. She was a lovely, lovely girl, still is. And she worked for Frank Maloney, then Frank Maloney, Lennox Lewis, Mick Hennessy, of course. And so she had a lot of experience in boxing, but she wasn't involved in the sport. And I had a chat with her, and she was delighted to come in as the assistant secretary. And she's done it for the last 6 years. And obviously, as the years have gone by, I've just talked to her about when I might step down. And one of the problems in this game, in the ring and out of the ring, is that people go on forever. And I see on my side of the ropes, we all get old. I'm okay. I'm absolutely fine. But it's no good, as I said, me dropping dead and nobody knowing what's going on. So Debbie and I decided after 40 years, which was a nice round figure, that I'd step down. But I'm still there helping her, and I speak to her, well, at least 3 or 4 times a week.
And as you said, Debbie's got incredible experience. How much of what does it say about the Commonwealth Boxing Council that you've appointed a woman, the first female honorary secretary in the organisation's history? It just seems like a really good step forward.
People like to make a lot of that. For me, it's always been about the best, if I must say so, the best man for the job, whether that man's a man or a woman. Not only, obviously, if I'm not stupid, I figured that having a woman secretary would be of some interest to a lot of people. We live in times over the last, 40, 50, 60 years where women have made tremendous strides in the sort of positions they're now holding, which hitherto very, very few women held. But for me, it was natural. Debbie was the best person for the job. But as it happens, since we're on the advancement of women, we've actually just taken on our first female director as well, Shivana Inalsingh from Trinidad and Tobago. Her father has twice been president of the Commonwealth Boxing Council. He's still a director. And he was also, for many, many years, the senior medical officer of the WBA. And Shivana is, when I say she's young, to your younger listeners, she'll probably be quite old, but I think she's in her 40s, something like that, late 30s, 40s. But she's bright, she's full of enthusiasm, and she'll make a big difference to the sitting around the table when we meet once a year.
Now, as well as serving on the CBC, you were General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control for, was it 8 years?
8 years, yes.
How difficult was it, or challenging, combining the two roles? Because it seems like two full-time jobs in and of themselves.
It wasn't really a problem because I had all the facilities of the board backing me up as Commonwealth Secretary. The job became harder when I left the board. Simply because I didn't have a PA, I didn't have everybody doing all the little jobs which I ended up having to do myself. And in fact, the board subsidised the CBC since it was incorporated in 1997. And in fact, since it was set up as a committee in 1954, the board has always subsidised it. But when I stepped down as General Secretary, nobody wanted to do it. So I said, well, I'll carry on. The job of General Secretary was tough, as it should be. But remember, I worked for Ray Clark and John Morris for how many years? For 20 years. So fortunately, I came in with some experience, as indeed did Ray and John when they both took over as General Secretary. But nevertheless, that last 8 years was tough. But as I always used to say to myself, if you're doing a job that's worth doing, it's always going to be tough.
And looking at both organisations and your tenures, I mean, it's hard to pick out highlights with such a long period in charge, but what do you look at as things the board and the CBC achieved during your time that you're most proud of?
One of the things I'm most proud of, it's a very small thing, it was mentioned in my tribute. I got my old friend Alan Minter a WBA belt. I got Michael Watson a WBO belt, even though he didn't win the championship. And I also got Howard Winston, my hero. You interviewed me when I took over as General Secretary, and I mentioned that he was my hero. Well, I got his widow, Bronwyn, a WBC belt, which he never received. That's a small thing. But on a more major thing, my finest achievement, I think you might say, and I didn't do it single-handedly, was when I took over, the board was in administration. And the bosses of the board were, in fact, the administrators, Hacker Young. And my chairman originally was Lippery, but he was only my chairman for a few months. Lord Brooks took over, and Lord Brooks didn't take orders from anybody. So I had two bosses. I had Lord Brooks, who was a fantastic boss for me, and I had the administrators on the other hand. But I also had the vice chairman, Judge Alan Simpson, who has a tremendous brain. And I also had Robert Smith, the current General Secretary, who supported me. And I think I told Robert Smith, actually, because I'd seen Ray and John sort of slightly disillusioned towards the end, I said to Rob, I'm only going to do this job for 5 years. I want to go with a life ahead of me. And I think getting the board out of administration, I say not single-handedly, I had a really good team around me, above me and aided by Rob Smith as well, I think was my best achievement. Keeping the board as a recognised, how can I put it? A lot of people were prepared to write off the board when we lost the case against Michael Watson, and then we lost the appeal. A lot of people were prepared to write off the board, and I think I played a major role in keeping the board, with the help of all what was then called Fleet Street in those days, as a sort of a respected organisation. The other thing I'm really proud of is that two things to do with Michael Watson. We lost the decision in the first case. We went to appeal and we lost. But the appeal judges said, we're making new law. I won't go into too much detail, but if they make new law, they give you leave to appoint to appeal, further appeal to what was then the House of Lords, but in fact is now the Supreme Court. And I remember sitting with the steward and I said, look, we've lost the first case. We've lost the second case. Whatever the rights and wrongs of it, we have a boxer here who's badly injured. And I don't think if we're trying to re-establish our credibility, it'll show us in a good light if we continue to fight this to the bitter end. My advice to you, and that was my job to advise the stewards of the board, my advice to you is accept the decision of the appeal judges and let's see if we can work something out with Michael Watson, not personally, but with his team. And let's get out of this as best we can, but let's not pursue it to the bitter end. I think that will damage our credibility. And I think it was the right decision. And following on from that, subsequent to that, I persuaded the awards committee to, I can't remember the year actually, you might remember, Michael Watson did the London Marathon in 24 hours. Do you remember?
I'm not sure which year, but I certainly remember him doing it.
Well, I got him the Special Services Award, and we invited him to the board's awards luncheon to receive that award. And so later on, I got him his WBO belt. And during his career, I never had spoken much to Michael. And obviously, during the case, I didn't speak to Michael. But sometime later, when all this was over, he said, so I'm not going to tell you what he said to me, and I'm not even sure I remember it rightly. But he said something to me, he called me over, and he whispered in my ear, and he said something really nice to me. And although I've actually forgotten the actual words, the memory of what he said, is one of my abiding memories, even if I can't remember the exact phrase that he used. Because, as I say, at the end of the day, right or wrong, there was a very badly injured boxer. And I'm proud of those things, getting the board out of trouble, reconciling. In fact, I even had a letter from the solicitors saying how pleased they were that we were able to deal on a personal level with Michael as well as through lawyers. And I'm very proud of those two things. Actually, there's a third thing, if I may.
Of course.
And that is Mike Tyson. Remember Mike Tyson? He came to Glasgow, came to Manchester, which was a huge success. We had all that fuss. People didn't want him in the country. He was a rapist. I don't condone anything he did, but nevertheless, he was a professional boxer, and that was a huge success. In Brixton, if you remember, the council in Brixton said we don't want him here, but he stopped the traffic. But he had to take shelter he was so popular. Had to take shelter in a police station, and then of course he knocked out poor old Julius Francis in a couple of rounds up in Manchester, but it was packed. But his second time he came here, it was a disaster. It was everything in the build-up was wrong. It was a rainy day in Hampden Park. There was troubles on the undercard with the Robin Reed fight, and it was just a miserable, miserable day. And at the end of it all, Mike Tyson knocked out Lou Savarese. In fact, he was disqualified actually for not stopping the contest when ordered to do so by the referee in something like 28 seconds. The whole thing was a disaster. But in view of his not obeying the referee's instructions, in view of the comments that he made to do with Lennox Lewis afterwards, we called him before the board. And they went through, he had a team of lawyers here, Finer Stevens, he had at least 2 sets of attorneys in America, and they went through all kinds of legal rigmaroles to delay him having to appear before the board. And we did everything right. We insisted that if he didn't come, that he was represented. And the upshot of it all was that they finally agreed a date. And, I got a letter, an email, fax. Those days it was fax the day before from one of his lawyers. We want to call John Robinson as a witness. Will you please confirm that you have disabled facilities? Do you remember John Robinson of the WBU? He was a very, very overweight man. He was in a wheelchair. And you might also remember the board's headquarters in London with that little spiral staircase going down to the boardroom. So I thought, right, this is the nail. This is what the last tactic to stop this hearing going ahead. I walked up the road to the London Bridge Hotel, and I spoke to the lady there, Sue Clark, and I said, look, have you got disabled facilities? She said, yes. Well, can we book the room? And have you got a room where we can keep witnesses while they're waiting? And we did all of that in the space of about half an hour. I said, you know you're going to have a lot of press outside with cameras and everything. And so it was all sorted out, sent the either fax or email back. Hearing's going ahead, but we've changed the address, and yes, we have disabled facilities. Well, John Robinson turned up, but he was never called. And it was only there as a tactic so that they thought we couldn't go ahead. And getting Mike Tyson, he didn't appear personally, but getting Mike Tyson's case before the board I think I was very proud of that.
Brilliant. Have you been keeping a close eye on the board since your departure? And if so, what do you make of its evolution, if you like, under Robert Smith's leadership or stewardship?
Well, I'm still very friendly with Robert. We don't speak so much these days. I never, unless there's something exceptional to do with Commonwealth, which in fact will be Debbie's job now, I never call him too much, but he'll call me occasionally on some matter, either to do with when I was General Secretary or to do with the Commonwealth. We're very friendly, we meet up, but I have no special interest in what goes on at the board. They've got a job to do. The job is a difficult job to do. I know how difficult it is, but boxing has changed. And Danny, you've been around long enough. Oh, boxing's not like it was when I was young. It's not as good as it was when I was young. Well, boxing evolves. If you read the first edition of Boxing, which became Boxing News in 1909, there's something in there about boxing's not as good as it was 20 years ago. It never is as good as it was 20 years ago. But so the board are dealing with things that I never dealt with, and I have a lot of faith in Robert Smith. I believe there's some good people on the board, people who've come after I've left. I've got every confidence in the board, but I don't pay special attention to what goes on. I've got enough on my plate here.
One thing a lot of hardcore fans or dedicated fans have talked about recently, maybe for 10 years now, is how the Commonwealth and British title belts have lost some of their luster, I suppose, with the proliferation of governing bodies and various kind of intercontinental, international belts and that kind of thing. What do you make of that? And if there is a case for that, how do we redress the balance a little bit and bring the British and Commonwealth belts back to prominence?
I'm not sure. What makes a title significant is who holds it. Now, as you rightly say, the European Boxing Union is now having to cope with the WBO and IBF European Championships, and all continental and to some extent national championships have been diminished. I'm not sure about the British Championship because that still tends to be the first port of call for most boxers. They want to win the British Championship. Commonwealth Championship, I think one of my minor successes has been keeping it as high as it's likely to be kept in these times. It means more than an international or a pentacontinental belt or an intercontinental belt. And if you look at some of our champions, well, let's take 4 most attractive heavyweights in the world: Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury. All of them undefeated Commonwealth champions. Now, I would never claim that we made them by the winning of the Commonwealth Championship, but nevertheless, the winning of the Commonwealth Championship aided their career and got them into the international rankings, for example. But if you look at lesser well-known boxers, Richard Comey, former IBF champion, he got his chance into the world rankings by becoming Commonwealth champion way back, 16 years ago now. What's his name? Joseph. I've forgotten his surname now. Boxer that won the WBA flyweight championship, got his Agbiko, got his chance into the international ranking. The guy from Sierra Leone, the guy that beat Frankie Gavin. Now he was defending his European championship, Leo Bundu, but nevertheless the Commonwealth Championship didn't do him any harm in getting his world title opportunity, which he didn't win, but it gave him his opportunity. And if you look back through our Commonwealth champions, we've had some of the best fighters in the world from different nationalities. Andrew Maloney, Jason Maloney, who had success in the Super Series and the WBA championships. Lucas Brown became WBA championship after winning our title. So I don't personally take it. The CBC can take some credit. I think what we do is we don't make or break careers, but as the wheel is turning, we give it a little push as it's ascending the world ratings, and I'm very proud of what we do.
Rightly so. What will be your main responsibilities day to day now that you've moved into this new role?
Assisting Debbie. Debbie is in effect the chief executive, even though she's, as I was and as my predecessors were, listed as a secretary. The secretary is in fact the chief executive because we run everything. And Debbie, there will come a time when Debbie probably will call me less and less other than on social matters, because we'll always remain friends. She's helped me a lot with this song, which I'll come on to a bit later on if you ask me about it. She'll probably come to me less and less. There's another guy that we rely on in the Commonwealth Boxing Council. You'll know him, Eric Armitt from Scotland.
Course, yeah.
And he's the conscience of the Commonwealth Boxing Council. When I was asked to allow contests to take place that were, a little bit maybe, were they 60-40 or were they 70-30 or 80-20? I would all speak to Eric. And although he never had the final say, because that would be unfair on him to put it all on his shoulders, if he was generally in agreement, even reluctantly, then I could get it past the other directors. If he said, look, I really don't like this fight at all, then I might not even put it to the other directors. I might just turn it down. So Eric Armitt is now doing that for Debbie, what he used to do for me. And he is one of the major members of the board of the Commonwealth Council. And the other person who is so effective is my friend Philip Brooke-Smith, who is a judge and a barrister who's our chairman. And I brought him on, how many years ago? Can't actually remember, 10 years ago now maybe, when I realized we needed a chairman who loved boxing, but didn't know necessarily all the infinite details and hadn't had time to form attachments. It was, in other words, was neutral and distant. Detached from the sport of boxing. But he always loved the game. I got him tickets to fights once in a while. And because he's a judge and a barrister, he's proved to be an absolutely fantastic chairman. So I just think we'll go on. We will keep our champions. The best, what I can tell you is this, Danny, the best boxers in the Commonwealth don't always fight for our title. But I'll tell you this, the best boxers in the Commonwealth who want to box for our title will always get the chance.
It's great stuff.
Great stuff.
Now, presumably the change of role comes with a bit of spare time that you didn't have before. What sort of thing will you be doing? What do you like to do in your spare time?
I seem to be like everyone who retires says they're busier than ever. I have my music. At the moment, I can't get back to England, but I still do a bit of music here in France. I've obviously got this charity project, which is sort of coming to fruition right now, which I'm very excited about. I have a very modest house here. I've got 4 bedrooms. This is my office, which is the 4th bedroom. It's an ordinary size, what you might call a suburban house, although it's in a very small little village. Not an old house. It's 1998, but I have 13 square 100 meters of garden, which in England would be a lot of garden, but over here where land is cheap, it's nothing. But it's a lot of work. And between March and October, I've really got to battle just to keep the garden looking halfway decent, and I'm not even a good gardener. So I have enough, and plus the fact I'm lazy by nature, and I don't want to work 24 hours a day. So I've got enough on my plate.
That's I should have mentioned over there is Normandy in France, or a village within that. You've been there for how long now?
We bought the place in 2005, moved here in 2009. But in fact, for many of those years, we were actually officially resident in the United Kingdom, and we had properties in the United Kingdom. But for various reasons I don't need to go into, this is now my principal residence. I've applied for residency here in France, and I don't have apart from my son's house where there's a guest bedroom, I don't have a property in England anymore.
Now, you alluded earlier to the song that's Don't Give Up, Don't Give In, featuring a cast of boxing legends, all in to help the Ringside Rest and Care Home become a reality, which is the idea, the project to create a residential facility for boxers who have various issues, both medical and emotional mental health problems, whoever needs residential care. Just tell us first of all how you got involved in the project.
Well, I've got 3. So I won't tell you the third one is. Well, I'll tell you, it's women boxing and music. Those are my three loves since I've been young. And I haven't had a great deal of success in all of them, but I've had a little bit of success. I've had a little bit of success in some of them. Well, boxing's probably, I mean, General Secretary of the Board is probably my major achievement. But I've always played music. I have not a lot of natural talent, but because if you do anything long enough, you acquire certain skills. But I've been writing songs since I was about 18. Back in the early 70s, I had, I think, 3 publishing deals. I earned some royalties from a song that was released. Nobody ever heard it. And I've always played to audiences. I've always enjoyed music. I wrote a song after the Asian tsunami in 2004. I wrote a song which I thought would be a charity song called "We Can Help You." Do you remember a group called T'Pau?
Yeah.
That had a big China in. Well, when I was living in Monmouth, just over the river in Hereford, where was it now? I don't know what the county was, but just over the river. Ron Rogers, the guy that wrote the song and was the boyfriend of Carol Decker, he had a studio, and I used to use his studio, and I recorded a lot of stuff at his studio. And when he played that song back, and he never said it about any other song that I ever played, he said to me, "I think you've got a hit on your hands." I always remember him saying that. Anyway, years and years later, I'm very, very friendly with Dave Harris. He made me a vice president of the Hastings Ex-Boxers Association. I rang David and said, "Look, I've got this charity song. If I change the words a bit, would you be interested in me doing something for your charity?" And yeah, he initially liked the song, but nobody else on the committee seemed to like it. So I rewrote it. I rewrote the lyrics. Nobody liked that. And then in the end, I revamped the whole song, made it faster, changed. I kept the major chords, but changed everything. And they seemed to like it. So a very good friend of mine, a guy I've been playing music with since 1969, he has his own studio up in Suffolk. We recorded up there with the help of some musicians that he knew up there. And that was the basic track. We brought it down to Abbey Road last November, and we had 20 odd. We had one current champion, and the rest were former champions or other associated boxing personnel. For example, the editor of Boxing News, Matt Christie. We had Bobby Edgeworth, my old Crawley ABC clubmate, who's now one of the most respected timekeepers in the country and still working. He told me the other day. So we had and Debbie Down was there as well, and we recorded this chorus over the last 6-7 months, since March. Really, it's been remixed, and finally I had it mastered at Abbey Road just the end of August, and it's now available for release. I'm grappling with technology, TuneCore, but it was officially set to be released next Monday. If I can get it out on TuneCore, then it will be out next Monday online.
And that's how people will be able to purchase it.
Yes, it'll be on TuneCore. It costs, I think it's 99 pence, of which I will get 79 pence. I do have an obligation to the studio because they work for nothing. A long time, spent literally weeks and months on the mixing, as well as 4 days of studio time. And he earns money out of that studio. And what I agreed with them from the outset with any proceeds, and there won't be much proceeds, but he'll get 10% of that by way of recompense. But apart from that, everything else will go to the charity. But I don't see it as being a financial money spinner unless we can attach it to a television program, to radio play or something like that, where the money is a little bit more for royalties, but actually for sales, it's 99 pence a purchase, of which 79 goes to the composer, which is me. And so you don't make the money out of sales that you used to make when I was knocking on doors of record companies back in the early 70s. But what we're all going to do is make up some CDs, only a limited number, and we'll be selling some of those off at sort of charity functions. We have a DVD of the recording. We have a well, it's not a DVD yet. We have a film of the recording. We have a small introductory film as well with people like Billy Schwer, Duke McKenzie, Terry Waller. I don't know if you know the name Terry Waller, 5 times ABA champion, England captain back in the 60s and represented Britain in the 68 Olympics. He's there singing. He does an interview. Stacey Copeland, our current Commonwealth welterweight championships champion. And Matt Christie's being interviewed as well. And so we have a little sort of taster, if you like, and that should be available online as soon as the film company make it available. I've actually got the film, but the film company haven't made it available to me online yet, which I'm hoping they'll do in the next 2 or 3 days.
Oh, that's great. And just about the wider project itself, people go out, they buy the single. How does that benefit ex-boxers who've fallen on hard times? Just give people an idea of the wider project here.
The project is a really ambitious project, and I'm not on the committee, and I'm not involved with any of the fundraising activities, but a lot of people, including, I think, Scott Welsh already, have done various things to raise money. So they're raising, people are walking for charity, they're running for charity, they're climbing mountains for charity to aid the funding of this charity. That's all been going on long before I came on the scene. It's now a registered charity. It's actually called the Ringside Charitable Trust, but it's known as Ringside Rest and Care. There's a website which people can visit and make donations to. All that work's going on. It's a tremendously ambitious project because it's going to cost a few £1 million to buy a suitable property, to renovate it to the standard necessary for the purpose, then to find the staff, and then once you've got all that set up, to run it. So we're talking of millions of pounds here. So it's really a long-term project. David Harris, the chairman, he is well known in Hastings. He's been involved in social care for many, many years, well, all his life, in fact. And he, if I can put it this way, he is very good at legally extorting money from public sources. You know, he is able to present a case. And I think what he's working on is if the charity itself can build up sufficient funds of its own volition, there are certain public agencies and other bodies, for example, the National Lottery funding, where they might be prepared to match the funding that the charity has already done on its own. So it's a hugely ambitious project. It's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before they're even in a position to buy a place, but it's long term. And if they can get the public funding, it'll work, and it'll work well. It's a great tribute to Dave. My role really is a very, very side one. I might be able to raise a few pounds for the charity, probably a small amount. But what might be more, I hope, of an asset to them is it will give them a public platform. If we can expose the video of the song on television, online, if we can have the song played on the radio, it's going to raise the charity. And that's where I see the strength of the song, if we can get it there.
We'd certainly be happy to put the song on the YouTube channel when it's ready, when you have the video online. We're more than happy to help spread the word for what that's
Excellent.
worth.
Yeah, excellent. Well, every little bit helps. You do something, you'll know 10 people who might be interested, and those 10 people might know another 10 people. You know the way it works. It's how these things go viral, and all of a sudden, some little bloke filming his dog in, Richmond Park a few years ago, he suddenly gets 10 million viewers hitting on his little film.
Well, fingers crossed we achieve even a fraction of that, but for a much worthier cause.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, I want to say I really appreciate your time. It's been fascinating to catch up, and I hope we do it again soon.
Yeah, I follow you, Danny. I see your bits and pieces every so often. I'm glad to see you still there, pushing out the news of the sport. Yeah, and I always remember you were the guy that interviewed me when I took over. So there we go. You interviewed me at the beginning. You interviewed me at the end.
Well, it's not the end yet.
No, well. All right. Well, all power to you, Danny, and I hope you continue to do what you're doing and getting the people hitting on your podcast for increasing numbers.
Thanks very much, Simon. I hope everything goes well for you. Speak to you soon.
All right. Take care.